Hello YouTube family, this is Alex here from Van House German Shepherds. Today I'm continuing our third video in a three-part series related to line breeding and inbreeding. And of course the ultimate program of breeding is to create a new breed. So we're going to cover the difference between creating a line within an existing breed or a strain versus creating a whole new breed. Before I begin, please click like and subscribe. I'm going to turn the light on. It's in my eyes a little bit. I think the lighting in this room is adequate. If the camera for some reason zooms in and out and autofocus adjusts, forgive me, it's an old camera. I have a new camera on the way, but for now bear with me as this camera is old and it might autofocus on its own without me controlling it. Alright, with that being said, how would you start a new breed? Well, the first question you have to ask yourself is, why would you start a new breed? There are over 400 breeds available as far as I know, and in other countries more than 500 are recognized. Not every breed recognized in the AKC is internationally recognized. There are some breeds beyond what the AKC recognizes in the world. So, what is the purpose of creating a new breed? Well, a new breed has to meet something as a goal that an existing breed does not provide. So you have so-called designer breeds like poodle crosses, golden doodle, Bernese mountain dog with poodle. I think they call that Bernedoodle. You have all these doodles. And these designer breeds are nothing more than a play to get the high-end consumer to spend money on something unique and therefore should be paid more. Then you have maybe pocket breeds, maybe pocket bullies, maybe French bulldogs. Now in these different kind of designer breed dogs, there's a lot of medical intervention involved in getting the dog, or even British bulldogs nowadays. There's a lot of medical intervention involved on the part of the breeder to make the dogs born. In other words, they can't have sex naturally, so you got to use artificial insemination. They can't give birth naturally, so you got to have a big head or a small birth canal, so you need a C-section. So if you can't conceive naturally and you can't be born naturally, in nature such an animal would die. You can't carry out your own young and perpetuate your own young, you would die. Survival of the species is a key goal in natural selection of animals. Now mankind has replaced nature in creating animals. So in my opinion, any animal that can't breathe naturally, can't breathe properly, just breathe, get air into its lungs because the nose is too short. I think it's a cruel thing to have an animal that can't breathe. Breath and air is fundamental to life. So in my opinion, if a breed becomes that extreme that it can't breathe on its own, can't breathe on its own, breathe, I just want to make sure I'm emphasizing clearly so people can hear me properly. In other words, if you're creating a breed, you must take the welfare of the animal into account as your core ethical concern and responsibility. So if you are breeding a brachycephalic breed, I know people like brachycephalic breeds, that's fine. Brachycephalic breeds have existed since the 19th century, but don't breed them too extreme. Breed them so they can breathe and have air in their lungs. Breed them so that the instinct to reproduce is not lost and the ability to do it naturally is not lost. In other words, clean up your act, guys. Try to make animals that can function naturally, reproduce naturally, give birth naturally. And if an animal can't give birth naturally to its young, you have to think about what can I do as a breeder to modify this breed so that doesn't happen. Maybe breed for less excessive head size so it can come out through the birth canal more easily. maybe breed with a slightly longer snout, so it has better breathing ability. Not up close all the way up to the eyes, but a little bit more of a distance. So be careful in breeding for extreme traits. That's not what this video is about. This video is basically the logic of creating a new breed from a genetics point of view. But you have to talk about the ethics of creating breeds that would not breathe or survive on their own. It only requires severe intervention by mankind in order to reproduce. Again, you want to breed healthy, viable individuals. Okay, so what is the problem in starting a new breed? Let's explain that problem. Let's take a very popular mix, which I think you know how I feel about this mix. And we're going to take a poodle, and we're going to take a golden retriever, and we're going to take, let's say this is the female as a circle, and let's say the golden retriever is a male as a square. I'm going to breed them together, and I'm going to create an F1 mix, okay? The F1 mix is 50% poodle and 50% golden retriever. But are they really 50% poodle or 50% golden retriever? No, they're 50% of each dog, because you're not breeding the breed, you're breeding the dog, right? This dog happens to be representing the breed, but that's not what you're breeding. You're breeding that particular animal, which happens to be part of that breed. But you're not breeding the breed, you're breeding that particular dog, right? And that will be a key point. Watch where I'm going with this. Now, alright, so my first mix is a 50-50 mix, okay? Of both breeds. Alright, now, since there's nowhere to go, either I can breed to a poodle or I can breed to another golden retriever. If I take the F1 mix and I take another golden retriever as the next breeding partner of this dog, as an example, right? I'm going to put another golden retriever, which is a different dog than this dog. I'm just putting the breed down, not the dog, okay? And I mix this, we'll call this dog F1 because it's an F1 mix, right? Now, the dog which comes out in the F2 generation, which is the next generation, is now 75% golden retriever and 25% poodle. So I diminish the poodle blood by 25%. If I do another one, golden retriever, let's say, the next time this happens, it becomes 87.5% poodle and 12.5%. It becomes 87.5% golden retriever, 12.5% poodle. If I do it again, let's say, it becomes 93% golden retriever and only 7% poodle. So if I was to breed back to the golden retriever every time, let's say, the more often I repeat the golden retriever as the next partner in the breeding selection, the more I cut down the blood of the poodle and the more I enforce the blood of the golden retriever. F3 is already 75, the F3 generation is 87% golden retriever, and the F4 generation is already 93% golden retriever. It would look practically like a golden retriever. You really couldn't tell 7% is not pure genes. It would be 93% pure golden retriever. Or the exact opposite. If this dog was a poodle, rather than a golden retriever. So now it's the exact same logic, just reversed. You're increasing the poodle characteristics and you're decreasing the golden retriever characteristics. In other words, if you breed back to one of the two parent breeds, your ability to maintain a 50-50 cross goes away every time you breed to a partner of that particular breed. What if you alternated? What if you went poodle, golden retriever, poodle, golden retriever, poodle, would that work? No, because that's not how genetics works. You're not mixing soup where you have split peas and potatoes and celery, and you're taking different amounts of celery and different amounts of split peas. You're not making a soup. So you're mixing genes. So how can we make this work? Well, most golden doodle breeders are desiring to emphasize poodle characteristics rather than golden retriever characteristics because they feel that's a hyperallergenic breed. Although there are others. The Schnauzer's a hyperallergenic breed as well, right? So they usually take the F1 mix and breed it to another poodle, and they call it F1B. It's not F1B, it's F2. It's not F1B. I don't know where they get B from. It's an F2 generation. It's the next generation. So if you do this mix, which is 50-50 poodle and golden retriever, and you mix it again with another poodle, this outcome in the F2 generation is 75% poodle and 25% golden retriever, right? Now, if you're desiring poodle characteristics, just get a damn poodle. This dog being 75% poodle and 25% golden retriever is still not a poodle, it's still a mix. It's not going to breed true. Some puppies will come out looking more like poodles, and some puppies will come out looking more like golden retrievers with curly hair, and some will come out looking like golden retrievers, period, despite having poodle blood. So, are you accomplishing a breed by doing it over multiple generations this way? No, because you're not maintaining a 50-50 mix of characteristics. So even when you're dealing with a pure breed, imagine a bowl. Imagine a big salad bowl. In the salad bowl, I've cut tomatoes, I've cut grapes, and I've cut scallions. Okay? Nobody will eat that, but I'm just pretending, okay? Now, out of this salad bowl, I've mixed it together with vegetable oil, right? Tomatoes, scallions, and I want to pick out characteristics which are a lot of tomatoes mostly, and I want a little bit of scallions. In other words, I want to take my spoon and mostly take out of this big bowl of mixed vegetables, mostly tomatoes, and I don't want that many grapes, and I don't want that many scallions. So when I dip in with my scoop, I've gotten some tomatoes and a little bit of scallions and a little bit of grapes. Then I take another scoop from that mixed bowl of vegetables. In the next scoop, I've gotten more grapes, no tomatoes, and scallions. Then I take another scoop. Every time I take a scoop of the 3 vegetables I've mixed, each time I may not get tomatoes more, I may get scallions more, or I may get grapes more, or I get grapes and scallions but no tomatoes. You follow? If genes were a mix of fruit in a bowl, every time I scoop, I'm not going to get that correct mix that I want. So imagine you're in a rock quarry and you want little rocks and big rocks and gravel or sand, and you want to limit that machine picks up the mix, and you want the little rocks, not the sand. Well, every time that big shovel machine picks up something from that quarry, you may not get what you wanted every time that machine picks out from that quarry. You might get, in this gravel scoop, you might get more sand. In the next one, you might get big rocks, but no little rocks. In the next one, you get more little rocks mixed with big rocks. In other words, you're not going to get the same combination every time. That's how gene recombination works. You don't know which genes will recombine with which genes and in which proportions. Okay? So this is the problem of not having a plan. This is not a plan, right? Now, so somebody says, well, I want to breed back to the pure breed. I want to create it twice. I'm sticking with my example of golden retriever and poodle, it could be any breed. I'm just explaining it because it's a popular mix. So let's say I'm going to take golden 1, a male. I'm going to put M for male. I'm going to take poodle 1. I'm not going to give a name, I'm going to call it poodle 1. The name is irrelevant. And that's going to be a female. Now over here, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to do poodle male. This is dog number 2. And we're going to create a golden female. We're going to call it number 2. Okay. I take these 2 dogs, golden and poodle, and my first is an F1 cross of these 2 breeds, but really it's these 2 dogs, not these 2 breeds. And then I do this one over here. And with respect to these 2 dogs, this is an F1 cross. And these crosses are 50-50 each, right? Okay, and I breed the first F1 cross with the other F1 cross, and that's my F2. Now, which ones will I pick? Well, I will pick the one which I desire the characteristic. So, in that first list of puppies, that could be 10 puppies, right? I'll pick the 3 or 4 that most resemble the poodle, because that's what I'm looking for, that's my look. And in this mix, I'll pick the 3 or 4 which most resemble the poodle from this mix, which very little resemble the golden, right? Because that's my criteria, let's say. You have to have a criteria. So not only am I breeding 2 breeds, but I'm also applying selection process. So there's the inbreeding, line breeding, but there's selection. Selection by man for characteristics is the most important step. So in this outcome, I've taken 2 50-50 crosses, bred them with each other, and now is that a new breed? No. Because despite mixing 50-50 from 2 different parents of each respective breed, I still don't maintain a 50-50 in the pups. Because genetically the genes don't combine 50-50, they combine 60-40, 70-30. In other words, you're not breeding the breed like it's a soup, you're breeding the dog. So the question is which characteristics will combine with which. In other words, will the poodle characteristics from this poodle will combine with the poodle characteristics of this poodle? No, they're completely unrelated. So there's no homogeneity of genes. So these are completely unrelated dogs. So am I breeding the breed or am I breeding the dogs? I'm breeding the dogs. I'm not breeding the breed. So how would I do it? How would I create a breed? You see the problem? The problem is even if you're mixing 2 50-50 mixes from 2 separate poodle females and 2 separate Labrador males, or whatever the genders are, you could mix it up. One is the male on this side and the female of the poodle is on this side. In other words, it doesn't matter. 4 parents, right? Still not creating a breed because it's a 50-50 mix, but there is no homogeneous genes to recombine in the offspring to carry forward the characteristics. You see that? So how would you create a breed? Well, the first thing you need to understand is when you're creating a breed, you must start off with dogs with a similar phenotype. For example, let's say I was to create a breed, and I'm not doing this, I'm just explaining the concept. I'm not really doing this in real life, in case anybody's wondering. This is simply a thought experiment, okay? Now, let's say the first dog would be a German Shepherd. The other dog would be the French Bisseron, which kind of looks like a Doberman. It may have been one of the progenitors of the Doberman, but it's a separate breed. It's an ancient breed. The French Bisseron. Since I have German, I'm going to put French here. The French Bisseron. And the third breed, let's say, for argument's sake, will be the Dogo Argentino. A very powerful hard catch dog. It's a Mastiff type fighting breed. Okay, now this dog is from the Mastiff family, right? This dog is from the herding family. It's a herding dog. And this is also a herding dog. Would it be easy to combine these three breeds? No. Because the German Shepherd has erect ears, wolf-like muzzle, wolf-like facial shape. The Becerrone has a narrow muzzle, fawn and a black brindle coat. It has a straight back, no sloping in the spine like the German Shepherd nowadays have. And this dog has a rounded muzzle. The ears naturally, unless they're cropped, would be floppy, not straight. A very muscular chest. Very different anatomical structure. So would this be my good starting point to create a new breed? No. But what if this dog, as the third dog, was the Dutch Shepherd? Now the Dutch Shepherd really resembles the German Shepherd because back in the 19th century, the Malinois, the Dutch Shepherd, and the German Shepherd were not that separate yet. They were just the original land races. They were not breeds quite yet. So they have similar foundation dogs at some point historically that started off these three breeds. Over time they became very different, but you could see that a Dutch Shepherd, except for the brindle color, looks a lot like the German Shepherd, right? So would it be easy to combine this phenotype with this phenotype? Yes, it would. Would it be easy to combine with the Becerrone? Well, a lot easier than a Mastiff. So the dogs must start off in the same subset of dogs. Herding dogs with herding dogs, Mastiff dogs with Mastiff dogs, Retriever or gun dogs with Retriever and gun dogs. Now, what if the three breeds were, like for example, I wanted to breed the English Spaniel, the English Cocker Spaniel, not the American Cocker Spaniel. English Cocker Spaniel. I think it's called the Springer Spaniel. English Cocker Spaniel. I wanted to breed the Irish Setter. And I wanted to breed the Gordon Setter to create a new breed, right? Would it be easy to combine these three breeds? Yeah. They both have floppy ears that go down, not stand straight up. They're all bird dogs. One flushes the game, one is a pointer, but they're all field dogs which were used for hunting birds. Different sizes, but we can accomplish that, but are they all the same type? Yeah, they're all the Spaniel type. You see what I'm saying? So these will be easy to combine. Now, if instead of the Irish Setter, I decided to put the English Bulldog here as the third breed. Would this be a dog easy to combine with these two dogs? Absolutely not. This is a Brachyphilic breed, this is not. This is a breed which has short legs, stubby legs. These have long legs for running and hunting. This would be a very difficult dog to incorporate, right? So what's my point? My point is that before you begin a breed, the three existing breeds you're starting with have to have some similarity to some degree. Not be so wildly divergent that the characteristics can never merge. So if I was to breed a Dogo Argentino, which is a pure breed, and I would breed it with the Staffordshire Pit Bull Terrier, would that combination work out? Yeah, it would, because they're bulldog-like dogs. If I wanted to add in an English Mastiff to it, or an English Bull Mastiff to it, which is smaller, would that work? Yes, Molosser type and Bulldog type will combine nicely. But if I wanted to add a Cocker Spaniel to a Dogo Argentina, would that mix work well? No, it wouldn't. You see my point? So in other words, before you start a breed, there has to be some phenotypical resemblance to some degree between these three starting breeds. You can't start off with a breed which has no resemblance to each other whatsoever. You're not going to succeed, okay? So having said all that, as a precursor, how would I do it? Well, in my hypothetical example, we're going to do 3 breeds. Why 3 breeds? The AKC doesn't recognize it unless it's 3 breeds, okay? So we're going to take a German Shepherd. We're going to take the French Becerron, like I used him earlier. And I'm going to take the Australian Kettle Dog. Which might have some dingo in him. Now, one dog comes from Australia, one dog comes from France, one dog comes from Germany. Would these 3 dogs be easy to combine? No, they would not be easy to combine. But they all 3 herding breeds. Yes, they are. So it would be a lot easier to combine them than a Mastiff breed with a herding breed. You see my point? Alright, so now to make this easy, we're going to do a shorthand. We're going to call the German Shepherd GSD. Short, right? The French Becerron will be called FB. And the Australian Kettle Dog will be just called KD for Kettle Dog, okay? So I'm going to use this kind of a shorthand in order to make it work. How would I create a breed assuming these 3 breeds as my starting point? Again, this is a thought experiment. I'm not going to actually do this. This is a thought exercise. I would start off with a GSD. I would start off with a Becerron. And I would start off with a Kettle Dog, KD. And all of these dogs will be males. Okay? Now, before we start mixing them, you have to have an idea of your breed standard. What are you heading toward? What are you trying to accomplish? So you have to define that up front. So you would create a dog which has a greater size and mass than the Australian Kettle Dog, but that could herd aggressive, nearly feral cows, where they have to bite their ankles because they're so rough. You know, you want a dog which is rough because the animals it's herding are rough. These are not British cows, which are domesticated and soft temperament. These are strong, aggressive, semi-domesticated cows. Okay, you don't want a gentle dog. Okay, and these are not sheep, so they're not as meek as sheep. So you want a dog with a lot of herding ability, but greater size. You also want a dog that will have an intimidating presence to prevent maybe an attacker. So you want that Becerron has that Doberman look. It has that coat which is black and fawn, very narrow muzzle. If the ears are cropped, the dog looks very intimidating. So you want a dog which will be a good herding dog, but at the same time can do personal protection if called upon. So you want a dog which is about the size of a German Shepherd or a Becerron, but has the ability to work cows like the Australian Kettle Dog. Okay, what else do you want? Well, the German Shepherd in the heat of Australia will not do that well because it's a very heavy double-coated dog. So in Europe, in Germany, that heavy coat works. But in Australia, this is too hot maybe, right? So you want to reduce a double-furred dog to become a single-coated dog. That's one of your breeding goals. You want, the Becerron is a single-coated dog, and the Kelpie is single-coated, not double-coated. So what you want is the intelligence and trainability of the German Shepherd. You don't want the stubbornness of the Becerron, and you want the aggressiveness in herding livestock and the quickness of the Australian Kettle Dog. How would I combine these breeds? I just stated some goals, right? Well, the GSD male would be bred to a Becerron female Besserone female number 1 and Besserone female number 2. So I'm not, watch how I do it. Now, Besserone female number 1 and 2 are going to be half sisters of this male. So they're not unrelated. So these female 1 and female 2 are half sisters to each other and to this male. So I'm already starting with dogs which have a relationship to each other. I'm not starting dogs which are unrelated. I'm not starting off that way. I'm not breeding the breed, I'm breeding the dog. So remember that? Now they're going to produce half siblings, males and females, and I'm going to breed the half siblings, the males of Besserone female 1. I'm going to put BF1 and the female BF1 with each other, and this will be a 50% GSD, and each female will be 25%, but because they're half sisters, each female normally will be 25% each, right, of the outcome, right? That's from each female, female 1 and female 2, but because they're half sisters, these pups will be 3/4 siblings. In other words, they have the same male, but because the females are sisters, the puppies are 3/4 siblings. So these puppies would be 3/4 siblings. Now, who is the most influential dog? The German Shepherd, because he's father to both sets of kids. I'm going to take the Besserone and I'm going to breed him to German Shepherd female 1 and German Shepherd female number 2. And these are half sisters of each other and this male, just like I did over here. So we're going to do Besserone male, because he's the dominant dog, with GSD female 1 and Besserone male with GSD female number 2. Okay? And I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to take the Australian Kennel dog and I'm going to breed it with Besserone female number 1 and Besserone female number 2. And for a little bit of genetic diversity, I'm not going to make them half sisters. I'm going to make them unrelated. Okay? And they're going to create half siblings bred to each other, which is the Australian Kennel dog. That's 50%. And Besserone female number 1 has 25%, and Besserone female number 2 is 25%. So notice what I did. I created a prepotent GSD, mainly GSD dog with Besserone characteristics in this litter. I created mainly a Besserone dog in this litter, and I created mainly a Australian Kelpie dog in this litter. So I'm not representing the breed, I'm creating an animal which is, in this case, 50% GSD. That's the main dominant influencer. In this one, it's mainly Besserone. And in this one, it's mainly Australian Kennel dog. So I'm creating a prepotency factor where that breed, because that ancestor has been inbred on, now passes the traits reliably, not just as random combinations, okay? Now, so I have 3 breeds. I have 3 sets of half siblings, not yet married together. They're just all independently half siblings of a common father with different mothers. But remember, these Besserone females are related to this Besserone male, and this Australian Kelpie is related to none of these dogs, but we're creating a relationship between this litter and this litter. So because this litter is related to this litter, because these dogs are half siblings to this Besserone male, we already have a relationship between these Besserones from this litter and this Besserone from this litter. So I'm not starting off just the breeds being mixed equally. I'm starting off where the dogs themselves are already related. They're not just representative of the breed, they're sisters. So they're not raw blood. Now, I'm not going to calculate percentages, it would be too hard. Now, what's the next step? The next step would be to take my F1 GSD dog, which is mostly GSD, my F2 dog, which is mostly Besserone, and my F3 dog, which is mostly Kelpie. Okay? So my F1 is mostly GSD, my F2 is mostly Besserone, and my F3 is already mostly Kelpie. Now, am I starting off with the original breed? No, they're already a 50-50 mix of the other breed. So this is already a 50% mix of German Shepherd and Besserone. This is a 50% mix of German Shepherd and Besserone. And this is a 50% mix of Besserone and Kelpie. Okay? Now, these two are already related to each other because the females were the sisters of this male, of the male of this litter. In other words, I showed you that earlier. So now I'm going to take, now the Kelpie had no relationship, so I'm going to take the, now I'm desiring to go to make a smaller dog like the Kelpie, which is less fur, right? But it has erect ears like the other two. So I'm going to take this mix, which is 50-50 of each mix, and I'm going to make it a mix with this one, and I'm going to do an independent mix with this one. Now, all of these are my F1 cross, which is 50-50 each breed. This is my F2 cross, where the Kelpie dominant blood has been crossed with GSD and Besserone dominant blood. Because these two are cross-related because of the relationship of the male being a half-brother of the females, or even a full brother of the females. So these are already related, despite these two being two different trees, they're related because the dogs of the female are the sisters of the male in this one. So the male of this is the, in other words, you saw what I did. So now I'm increasing the Kelpie blood because he was married to these two bloods, okay? Now I've distributed my genes of 3 breeds across the F2 generation, okay? It's still a breed. Now, I take the outcome of this combination, which now represents an equal mixture of all 3 percentage. I check my percentages, and it's always the same across all 3 breeds. Now, the F2 cross, the ones which resemble the end product I want the most, is my F3 cross. And then I cross these with each other. Now let's say they're starting to look too much like a Kelpie and not enough like a German Shepherd. I would breed back to the original pure-blooded German Shepherd to reinvigorate the blood with German Shepherd characteristics. Or they're starting to look too much like a Besserone and not enough like a Kelpie, and I would breed back to a Kelpie. In other words, you have to reintroduce the original breed at some point as you go. You can't just keep doing it. But or you don't have to do it until maybe the F4 generation. In other words, now 8 generations later, the 3 breeds have been combined so frequently where I'm picking the characteristics I want based on the breed definition I've created, that now it breeds true. And now it's a dog which is a mix of all 3 equally in every generation. So what's the difference between what I showed you with the Golden Doodle versus this? The difference is that I created prepotency by creating a common father to two different breeds, females, 3 times. Then that prepotent dog represents his breed type preemptively in the offspring each time from all 3 sets. So that characteristics breeds stronger because he's now prepotent. Then I mix that, and I mix it again where it's now an admixture of dogs. I also made sisters of the one, sisters of the male dog of the other. In other words, the idea is that you have to have an eye for what you're going. Like for example, the Doberman was the Hungarian Vizsla, the Greyhound for speed to be able to run with a horse. The Rottweiler was used, the Bessero may have been used, and the Manchester Terrier may have been used, or the Miniature Pinscher may have been used. But which combination was used and in what degree, nobody knows the exact mix. The bottom line is Louis Doberman was able to create a breed which combines the speed and elegance of the Greyhound, the ferocity and the aggression of the Rottweiler, the strong fierceness of the Terrier, the Manchester Terrier. And over time, he refined it until he got the dog he wanted. So the bottom line is, he didn't start off with completely unrelated dogs. You have to create a dog which carries its genes forward. Now, once you've settled on the ideal specimen that represents your breed, right? Now you're 8 generations into your program through selective breeding. Now you have your ideal type. And that's an equal mix of all 3 dogs that looks like the outcome you wanted all along. He may look more like a Kelpie, that was your outcome. He may look more like a German Shepherd. But you could still tell it's not a pure-breeded dog, but it's been a mix of all 3. Now, he has the coat composition you want, the temperament you want. He can herd cows in Australia if you want, right? Now, you would breed him to his own daughters. Why are you doing this? You're doing this into locking him into all the generations going forward. So this dog, which is a mix of all these dogs, now becomes the fountainhead of your breed, and now you breed him to his own daughters and you perpetuate that new breed. Anyhow, this is not an exact science. This is the idea of how breeds are created. But the idea is to mix equally and look for characteristics, so not to breed back to one of the original breeds. I hope this was educational. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Take care, guys.